Hey guys, my guest today is author Joanne DiMaggio, and we're going to be talking about her new book, Inner Light, How the Beatles Planted Seeds in Our Soul. We'll be right back. Grab your popcorn and snacks. Find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust, turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin. Good afternoon, everybody. How's everybody doing? My name is Charlotte. I'm going to be your host for the next hour. I'm also the owner of the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team based out of Sacramento, California. We are 45 strong up and down the state, which means if you have a paranormal issue or you think you have a paranormal issue, we can get to you. It might take us a couple days. California is a huge state. People don't realize how big we actually are, but it is a large state. But in the case that we can't get to you right away, we have mediums on staff who can phone you and do remote reads, and in most cases they can calm the energy down before we even get out there, which helps a lot for you and gets us through the door, so we can do our magic when we arrive. So if you want to find us, just check us out. Dial us up on social media. You can find us everywhere, mostly Facebook right now. So look through California Haunts and California Haunts Radio. Find us that way. That being said, if you're watching from Facebook today, and a lot of you are, and you like and see what you see and like what you hear. See and like, yeah, that makes sense. See and like what's on here, what you hear. Oh my God. See and like what's on here. My words just aren't coming today. Please feel free to follow. We've been doing a lot of shows, and it really helps us, as far as the FYP movements on Facebook if you follow us. And also, give us a thumbs up, happy faces, all that good stuff. Because again, that puts us up higher in the FYP to where Facebook sees that generating, and they put us out to more people. Okay? Same thing with YouTube. If you haven't subscribed, please feel free to subscribe. We've got more than 900 videos sitting over there. It's all this show. I'm a journalist, photojournalist. I like to do different types of shows, so you're going to find a combination of a lot of things, and I'm sure you'll find something that you like. So please subscribe. Same rules, smiles, happy faces, and all that stuff at the top helps us with the FYP. And if you chat in the chat room amongst yourselves, or with me, or our guest, that also puts us up higher in the FYP when they distribute us. It's all about sharing, right? It's all about getting the word out. Same thing with all the other ones we work with, TikTok, Twitch, all those places. They all work the same way. Anyway, we're going to swing right into the show tonight. I'm really excited about this. I was not a child of the 60s. However, I was a child of the 70s to mid-70s, and my sister was 11 years older than I am, or she's still 11 years older than I am. And I remember hearing the Beatles, the Beatles music, among other things that were, towards the end of the 60s and all that. And I loved it. I've still got a copy of the White Album sitting here. And so I became a Beatles fan through my older sister. So that, that worked out actually pretty well over the years. So I was fascinated to read to read Joanne's book because, it's just so inspirational to me. That's the word I'm looking for, inspirational to me. Because there is a decided change. As you're listening to the Beatles from their earlier stuff, there is a decided shift in their music at some point. And, it was due to this religious thing that they got into. But it's inspirational. And I can vouch for the inspiration. I mean, when I went to Hawaii for the first time, I came back totally inspired, even with the way the ancient religion was. It really affected me. So I can understand what happened, with the Beatles, with this religion movement that they had, and how it got into their music and stuff. So I just froze up, guys. Just saying this. My internet. There's a lot of news going on, and there's a lot of, and so everybody in this neighborhood is, I'm not liking the day at all already so far. There's a lot of people that have Xfinity in this neighborhood, so, I mean, sometimes it's a problem, and today just might be one of those days. Something big must have happened. All right, let me bring Joanne in, and she can talk a little bit more about that, but I can understand. The direction it went with the Beatles. Here we go. Hello.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good, really good. Now, if my internet holds up, I'll even be better.
Yeah, you and me both. Okay.
So tell me about you, please.
Tell you about me.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. I was a president of a Beatles fan club when I was a
Right.
teenager back in the 60s. So that kind of reveals my age. Uh, and those are interesting years. I sort of had a behind the scenes viewpoint of what was going on within the fan clubs, a
Mhm.
little bit different perspective.
Mhm.
Um, and then after the Beatles broke up, about maybe 15 years later, I got involved with the metaphysical world and
Mhm.
became a past life researcher and therapist. And I always wondered what was there anything that happened as a child or a teenager that influenced me later in life to become a past life therapist, because there was nothing in my childhood or the way I was raised, my family, the neighborhood I grew up in, that would lead me to something like that. I was Catholic, went to 12 years of Catholic school, and uh, the word reincarnation never came up, obviously.
Right.
And so when I was an adolescent, before the Beatles came out, I was already drawn to books about reincarnation. So I was reading about uh, uh, Bridie Murphy. That was a book that came out. That was the first book I read about reincarnation. I had
Mhm.
a lot of questions as a child growing up about Catholicism. A lot of it didn't make any sense to me. I had a lot of questions. I didn't get any answers. I was really, I guess, at an early age, looking for a more spiritual connection to
Mhm.
my creator, and I wasn't getting it. So I started reading this other material, and then the Beatles came out in '64. I
Mhm.
put all that aside, pushed, I just plummeted into Beatlemania, and then I after they broke up,
Mhm.
1987. By the time 1987 came along, and Shirley MacLaine's book Out on a Limb became
Mhm.
a miniseries. And when she's talking about reincarnation, it was like this big wake up call. And I thought, oh, yeah, I remember that how much I was interested in that topic. And so I went back into it and have been with it ever since. So for me, it was like, I was wondering, did something happen during those pivotal years of growing up that led me in that direction in the first place? And so I
Mhm.
started looking at my connection to the Beatles to
Mhm.
find.
Mhm. Well, like I said in the intro, there is a change with the Beatles. In the style of music that they were doing.
Mhm.
And it's a noticeable change. And then, like you say in your book, they did go to India, and like I said, even with me going to Hawaii, I found the religion part of it over there to be fascinating. From the ancient stuff. So I can see how they might, the group, the guys in the group itself might have been impressed with what was happening over in India religiously.
Yeah, and you know what? And I don't think any of us as Beatle fans understood what was going on when they
Hmm.
first did that. We thought it was kind of weird, to be honest with you.
Hmm.
What are they doing? Where are they going? Who is this Maharishi? What is
Right.
the sound of this music that George is getting into, this
Hmm.
guitar and everything? So we kind of thought it was weird, but because we loved them and because we were like little sponges,
Right.
everything that they said or did, we absorbed it. Many of us stuck with it. Some people did say that they got so turned off that they stopped listening
Hmm.
to their music. But you're right, the music did change drastically. And if you started really uh, getting into the lyrics, there was a lot
Hmm.
there. I had no idea that they had made, as well, not all four of them,
Right.
primarily George and John, had made so many comments about so many aspects of metaphysics until I started doing the research for this book. And then it really surprised me.
Well, I could say during that time, like you say, a lot of people didn't get it, and my father, fathers how they are, and that was his thing. Was he was? I remember him telling us. He says, "That's the drugs talking.
Oh
That's
my,
the drugs making them do this." And it's like, well, I don't think so. Even when I was, 7, 8 years old, I kind of went, I don't think so. It's just a different kind of music, that they're doing. I mean, it happened to a lot of them. I mean, to find religion. Elvis found religion too. With Larry Geller. I mean, all those guys. Well, not all of them, but the majority of them. Even the Beach Boys changed their kind of. Were playing around with their styles.
Yeah, I think in the 60s it was a really unique time in that a lot of the groups started to get into a much more profound type of music, lyrics. And we were, all of us in that generation were hungry for something like that. We were desperate to find some sort of meaning in what was going on in the world. I mean, we talk about things that are going on now, but imagine being in the 60s where all those things were happening. And so the profoundness of the music, it wasn't just the Beatles. You've got the Moody Blues, Simon and Garfunkel.
Yep.
I mean, if you compare the music then to what they have today, back then it fed our souls. It told us that there was greater meaning in life, and we were hungry for that, and so we embraced it, and that's what made that time so special to us.
Let's take a few steps back with this. You talked about the fan club. Now, you had one of the first Beatles fan clubs here in the United States, correct?
I don't know if it was one of the first, but I did. Yeah, it must have been, because it was right away in February of '64 when they first came. Yeah.
And how did that work? Because nowadays, when you sign up, at least in my time, I didn't do any fan club stuff when I was real young, but later on towards the end of the 70s and 80s, I did. And AOL came out, and so you were able to sign up for these things online. How did that work way back then?
Oh my gosh, it was so prehistoric. What I did was I decided I wanted to do a fan club, and what was my fan club going to consist of? I was going to do a newsletter, and maybe have meetings, and we'll have some low dues and all that. So I started with my friends, and then we didn't have the internet or anything like that, but we had magazines. We had Tiger Beat and 16 magazine, all those magazines, and a lot of them, and there were a lot of Beatle magazines that were coming out. Some of them included columns that had pen pals, so you could get a Beatle pen pal. So that was my first venture into marketing. I would send out letters to these pen pals and say, "Hey, I've got this fan club. Do you want to join?" And so that's how it grew. Yeah, we didn't have any other means. We didn't have Facebook. We didn't have internet. We didn't have anything other than, our news came from the same place everybody else got their news from, the DJs on the radio, or a newspaper article or a magazine article. So I just was kind of plugging away and doing my thing, doing my monthly newsletter and mailing them out. So, I mean, my database consisted of 3x5 cards. I was doing these newsletters on my mom's old manual typewriter, an old Underwood typewriter, big, huge, clunky thing, one at a time. And then I started using, anybody could believe this, carbon paper. Eventually, I bought a mimeograph machine, and I was doing stencils and then running them off. So it was very, very primitive in the beginning. It didn't get that much more sophisticated. By the time my club ended, I actually had a real word processor that Smith Corona came out with, and I was taking my newsletters I was taking them to a print shop and actually having them done professionally.
Nice.
So there was a big change in the 8 years between the time I started and the time I ended.
And then you got me to thinking about that too. I remember even I would do stuff like that, for the neighborhood kids, and there was never a way to do art on the top unless it was manually done. So you had your pens out, your crayons, or whatever you were using, and you did all that art yourself.
That's what we did, one page at a time. Good thing we weren't that successful that we had millions of members, because we would have been in trouble. But
right.
We managed to keep ahead of it, and do our schoolwork. And I set up a Beatle fan club in my basement of my parents' home. And I was alone down there. I kind of had my typewriter, and I'd answer the mail and fill orders for pictures and stuff like that. So at a very young age, I was already an entrepreneur, you might say, doing that sort of thing. Yeah.
So then I understand, and I did some research on you, and
Okay.
I understand that the fan club that you had ended up getting what, or the main fan club out of New York.
There was a national fan club in New York. The official Beatles fan club was in New York. They were under the auspices of Apple Records eventually when Apple was formed. They did not like the idea of there being individual, independent fan clubs across the country. There were several hundred of us across
Wow.
the country that had fan clubs. So it was like fans like me who just decided we wanted to form a club. You
Right.
know, it's like an early form of networking and stuff like that. So they sent out a notice that said all independent fan clubs had to be a part of the national fan club. And of course, I got up on my high horse and I said, "No way, Jose! I am not doing that. I don't want any part of that." Because they were asking. They said you have to have 25 of your members give us $2.50, which I know today sounds ridiculous, but back then it was a lot of money.
Mhm.
So in other words, I had to give them $50 in order to become a bona fide chapter of the
Wow.
National Fan Club. And so I refused. And I went and got the help of Jim Stagg, who is a disc jockey at a Chicago radio station, WCFL. We only had two radio stations back then that played pop music, Beatle music. That was one of them. Jim had a column that he wrote in the Chicago Sun-Times called the Stag Line. He printed my letter to him, and then I went and talked to him, and he was sort of my advocate. He tried to get in touch with the New York office. They wouldn't return his call. They wouldn't talk to him. So this went on for quite a while. Then things got quiet, and then they started up again, and we were sort of strong-armed into becoming we were being threatened basically, with lawsuits and stuff, like cease and desist having your little fan clubs. And so it got to the point where it was only three of us that were holding out. And then the people at the fan club in New York contacted me, and we talked, and they said, look, how about if you become national chapter director, meaning all the chapters in the country would report to you, and you can sort of be the liaison between the New York office and the fan clubs. I agreed to that, and so my club rolled over into the national club. It had some benefits, don't get me wrong, because they had all the latest news, they had all the latest photographs. There were a lot of promotional pieces that they had that we didn't have.
Mhm.
And so it was, but we did lose a lot of members because of that. And then out of that, they decided that they wanted to have one fan club per Beatle. And as it happened, Paul McCartney's club was available, and so I became president. My fan club changed its name multiple times during the time that I had it, and then it finally became the official Paul McCartney fan club.
Interesting. Interesting. Now let's rush a little. Let's look at the trip to India. What do you know about that trip to India? I read your book. It's a great book, guys. You need to get this book. Tell them about the trip to India and how it inspired George.
Well, they went to go work with the Maharishi Mahashogi to learn transcendental meditation. Um, this was spearheaded really by
Sorry about that.
George Harrison more than anybody else. But the others came along. I think Ringo lasted only 2 weeks, I think, and
Mhm.
he left, and then Paul left after that, and then John hung out a little bit longer, and then he left. He left as well, and George left. Um, but during that time, they learned how to do the transcendental meditation. If anything good came out of that time, that was it, because that was something that I think even to this day, Paul still practices that meditation. Uh, and George was really intrigued by the whole culture of India. He was intrigued by the spiritual beliefs of it.
Mhm.
He read everything he could read about it. He learned to play the instruments. Ravi Shankar taught him how to play the sitar, and you start hearing that music, that sound in
Mhm.
the music at that time. And then George's lyrics, of course, started to become, much more profound in nature and really looking inward more.
Mhm.
And so so that made a big difference. I don't think that really it affected Ringo at all. And Paul, I think maybe it did, but he didn't really talk too much about it at the time. Uh, you know, John was going kind of off in a different direction. He was a lot more political than the others, and of course George was the anchor, I think, of the spiritual part of the Beatles, and led them in that direction. So it had a profound effect on I think all of them, but particularly on George.
Now, when you first heard that type of music, what did you think?
I didn't like it at all. There was something about it that bothered me. The sound of it just I didn't resonate to it at all. Matter of fact, when one of those a George Harrison song would come on one of the albums, I'd skip it. And I regret that, because by doing that, because I couldn't resonate to the sound, I ignored the lyrics, and the lyrics were what really affected me the most. So once I was able to get past that, because I remember being at the Bangladesh concert in New York, and Ravi Shankar was there. He was one of the performers, and I know nobody in the audience really wanted to listen to that music, and so it wasn't just me, but I just personally didn't resonate to it. But like I said, once I was able to get past that, maybe in a past life, I might have had a bad past life in India. I don't know, but I couldn't get into it. But when I got to the point where I could pull out those lyrics and listen to them and understand what they were saying, it was created a whole different world for me.
What is one of your favorite songs from that time?
Actually, my favorite Beatles song is "Tomorrow Never Knows."
Okay.
Yeah, I liked that, and that was from the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Some of the lyrics, and there's so many references in there to reincarnation. Of course, I didn't know that at the time, but I really, I really loved that. I love the sound of that. Everything about it to me was just, and I love so many of the Beatles. It's always hard for Beatle fans to pick out, the one thing that they love the most, but that is my favorite. When I have that on in the car, boy, do I crank that up. Even at my age, it's like,
Why not? Why not? Now, being a Catholic, this must have just really opened your eyes, because I was born Catholic as well. And, for what I do with ghost hunting, I have to still walk on eggs a little bit when I'm over at the church and stuff, because I don't want them to really know what I'm doing.
Yeah, yeah. I was always curious. A lot of things didn't make any sense. I was leaning in the direction of trying to understand karma as opposed to sin. And I couldn't really, I could not really understand the whole concept of sin, because it felt like that we had a creator who would just arbitrarily punish us or not care about us. I have in the book an example about when I was a little kid. I used to walk to and from school every day, and we had crossing guards. And I thought to myself, well, what if it's Friday and I go home and I forget that it's Friday? My mom forgets it's Friday, and she gives me a ham sandwich, and I have the sandwich. Then I go back to school and I get hit by a car in the crosswalk, I die. Does that mean I go to hell? Because back then that was a sin to eat meat on Friday. So it was things like that that bothered me. And I thought about that a lot. And the whole idea of going to confession, and we had these little pamphlets that had all the list of all the sins we could possibly have committed, and we used to have to go in and tell the priest, I disobeyed my parents 5 times, I lied 3 times, whatever. It didn't. And then you get your penance, you say your penance, and then guess what? You're squeaky clean again. Your soul's squeaky clean. The idea of karma is completely different from that, because karma is cause and effect. So it's not so easy. You just don't say 10 Our Fathers and 10 Hail Marys and then you're squeaky clean again.
Right.
But so anyway, that's why I think it led me to start reading books that were written by like Jeff Stern and Ruth Montgomery and a lot of those early writers of esoteric metaphysical ideas about reincarnation and stuff like that. And suddenly that made a lot more sense to me. And so that started to pull me away. I remember questioning it a little bit in school. I know by the time I got to high school, though, if I dared to raise my hand to ask a question, I got, a demerit, had to spend time after school. I had the nuns were calling me an atheist because I dared to question, so it was a time of confusion for me. And, nobody really answered my questions except the whole concept of reincarnation.
Interesting. Very interesting. I had the same issues, but as I got more and more into ghost hunting, my family was more open to it.
Mm-hmm.
Because they had gone ghost hunting with me, so they had seen things as well. So you can't deny it. I mean, like with the work you do, if it's right in front of you, you cannot deny what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. I've worked with people all over the world. I've done regressions for people from every walk of life, and everybody's asking the same questions. Why am I here? I don't know why I'm here. Why are these things happening in my life? Why are these patterns repeating themselves? And I think that the whole concept of reincarnation answers all of their questions. It gives them hope. It gives them a sense of mission, like what's my soul's mission? Why am I even here? Why is my life the way that it is in terms of illness or relationship issues? And it answers every question you could possibly think of with a logical explanation. And people are healed. They usually only come for one session. That's it. Because we get to the root cause of what's bothering them. What are it's not like you treat the symptom or you go to a regular psychotherapist and you're going week after week after week. With reincarnation, we get to the root of it. And once it's exposed, it's like the light bulb goes off. They have so many aha moments. So it's very humbling for me to be working with people and enable them to have that kind of a healing on that level.
Absolutely. How long did it take you to do the research and write this book?
Oh, I think this book took me about 2 years. Yeah, I went through I had saved all of my newsletters from 1964 to the last one I did, which was in 1972. So I had all of those that I did. And then I started going through all of my Beatle biographies. I have about 60 Beatle biographies. So I was going through them to try to find quotes. That's why when you read the book, you're going to read quotes from other people's books.
Right.
That about a spiritual topic. And then at the beginning of the book is all about the fan clubs. And then I go into what other Beatle fans experienced, not just me, but I interviewed about 10 other fans my age to see if they were affected spiritually by the Beatles. There's a whole chapter on that. There's a whole chapter on soul writing, which is something I teach. Soul writing is a written form of meditation. And I've written a book about that. I have taught that, how to do it. And it's not automatic writing. It's completely different.
Right.
And so I found out that both Paul and John used a form of soul writing, the same process that's involved in soul writing, in some of the writing that they did in their music. And then there's a last chapter that goes into the various aspects of metaphysical beliefs and what they've said about them. So there's stuff on astrology, on numerology, and other, about death. How do they feel about death? And reincarnation, obviously. So exploring in their own words how they felt about it. The whole idea of the book, which is why I called it the inner light, how the Beatles planted the spiritual seeds in our souls, is because that's what I felt they were doing. They were planting seeds. And then in each of us, they blossomed at a different point in their lives.
I have a question about Yoko. I mean, I know people, that I've talked to over the years that felt that Yoko had a really heavy influence on that musical change. Is that true, or was she supportive anyway?
I don't know much about Yoko, so I couldn't really
Yeah.
do that for you. She was very supportive of John and anything
Okay.
that he did, and a lot of the metaphysical leanings that they had were based on, interests of Yoko. She's the one. They had a psychic sort of on staff, someone, an astrologer. I mean, she would look at the numerology, look what the numbers were. She collected things. She had some collection from ancient Egypt. John thought that they were a reincarnation of Robert Browning and his wife. So there was a lot there that she was a part of. But in terms of the music itself, I couldn't address that.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I was just curious about that. Tell me okay, because like you said, you were able to look at their music and it was very inspirational to you. What did you find so inspirational with it?
The lyrics,
Okay.
always the lyrics.
Okay.
I mean, the melodies was absolutely astonishing to me. Even now, when I listen to it, I'm like, wow, nobody since them has been able to replicate that. There have been obviously some beautiful music that since then, but nothing at the level of their music, and not at the consistency of it. Kept getting better and better and better. But some of the lyrics were silly. Some of them were, mundane. But every once in a while, there would be some lyric in a particular piece that would really get to me. And I would just, I talk about resonance and how you resonate to certain things, that you feel that really deep in your soul, but you don't know why you feel that way. That's how I feel about a lot of their music. It would just go right in my soul and grab me, and then it would stay with me. And I would think about it, and how do I apply this to my life? So, I didn't do that with anybody else's music. Like I said, there are some exceptions. The Moody Blues were probably my second favorite group, and Simon and Garfunkel. I did see them in concert. Saw them both in concert, and it just meant a lot to me and to my generation.
I think what comes to mind when I think of the Beatles right away is the song "Yesterday."
Yeah, and that's one of the ones that I have in the book that I believe Paul wrote using a form of soul writing. So soul writing is, you're writing in an altered state of consciousness. So sometimes, I know that when Paul wrote it, he said it was like somebody else wrote it. He wasn't even sure he did it. And it was it was given to him like a gift. Like, here's this song, Paul, where is this coming from? And a lot of composers and artists and writers ask that question, where does inspiration truly come from? And I think in the case of Yesterday, and Let It Be for Paul, and for John, Across the Universe and Nowhere Man, I think, they're saying, it came to me in a dream. Or I was just lying there minding my own business. All of a sudden, they download this music. So I think that process of soul writing that I teach, that Edgar Casey, who is my greatest teacher, taught, but he called it inspirational writing. I think that's something that's part of the process of writing music in that depth of profound nature of the words and things like that.
Now you mentioned, and of course, like I said, I read your book. I loved it. I'm going to give it to my sister to read because she's a huge Beatles fan. And you mentioned talking to others, about this as part of the interview process for your book. What were their reactions? Excuse me. What were they able to tell you?
Well, they're pretty similar to mine, and even though some of them were not Catholic, were not raised Catholic,
Right.
some of them, were raised in a Protestant religion, and they all had the same experience.
Mm-hmm.
So I think as a generation, we were all searching for the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
and the Beatles came and provided that. One of them said something really profound, which I thought was that stayed with me when she said, they gave me permission to look outside the box,
Sure.
to not, uh, you're in a particular family, you're in a particular religious belief,
Mm-hmm.
and within that, system, there's this internal programming going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so many times you're told, no, you cannot question this.
Mm-hmm.
This is just the way it is. She had commented that the Beatles gave her permission and made her see, well, there's maybe a little bit more to this than you think.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to start looking outside the box and see if it fits you better, and you can be freer. A lot of them talk that like that. They became free. They were
Mm-hmm.
able to explore other philosophies and other beliefs. So it was a real eye opener, and we all shared so many of the same experiences. It was really amazing to me.
Now, because you weren't there, obviously, but do you think that they wrote this music for themselves? Because I mean, expression is great. Like for me, as a writer, that's what I do. I write stuff, because it gets all that out of me. Do you think that writing this form of music was their way of expressing what was going on within them?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know their writing process. I
Right,
don't
right,
know.
right.
I don't know what they were consciously thinking at the time. I
Yeah.
don't think they thought to themselves, well, I'm going to write this because this is something that the fans are really going to love. I think
Right.
they were expressing a truth that was coming through them, that they felt the need to get on paper. I mean, as a writer, that's what we do, right?
Mm-hmm.
The inspiration is coming through you, and you feel the need to get it out. And what happens to it once it gets out, once you give birth to it, you don't know. You're
Right.
hoping for the best, but this is you. This is this aspect of you that you're sharing. And so I think that's, we were the very fortunate recipients
Mm-hmm.
of that exercise.
And the timing was right. The era was right. The timing was right because everybody at that point was into expanding their minds, to put it
Absolutely.
bluntly. So yeah. Um, do you think that had this happened, like, let's say the Beatles lasted through the '80s, and let's say they had their profound thing going on in the '80s? Do you think there was still room, like in the '80s, that this would have taken off like it did, or you think that like I said, the timing was just perfect?
No, I think the timing was just right. Look at the 60s. Look
Mm-hmm.
at everything we had going on, the civil rights movement,
Mm-hmm.
the equal rights movement,
Mm-hmm.
the Vietnam War, and then we had the assassination of President Kennedy
Mm-hmm.
and Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy. You have to remember the Beatles came out just a few months after Kennedy was assassinated.
Mm-hmm.
So we were in mourning, definitely in mourning. We were in a dark place. We were looking for the light, looking for something to distract us so that we didn't have to be, so morbidly entrenched in this horrible tragedy that we lived through. And here come the Beatles,
Mm-hmm.
like, like the light that just, I mean, they didn't affect everybody, obviously. Many
Mm-hmm.
adults didn't resonate to them whatsoever.
Right, right, right.
But our generation, the teenagers, we took it really hard, all those
Mm-hmm.
things that were happening, because I
Mm-hmm.
think we really felt a sense of responsibility that, to change the world. And things were not looking in our favor very much during that time period. So I think that they lifted us up. They saved us. They came in and gave us a reason to continue and to push forward and to remain positive and hopeful for the future.
Mm-hmm. Now, when they broke up,
Yeah.
how did you take it? Because it must have been really hard.
By then, I was so beaten down with
Mm-hmm.
the fan club.
Mm-hmm.
that we were on a parallel course. It was like I was thinking of giving all this up. I was already starting college.
Mm-hmm.
I had my entire teenage life had been devoted to them,
Mm-hmm.
and starting to get pressure at home from my parents that I was getting too old for this. And so um, what happened was uh, one of the fan clubs, the fan club for George Harrison, which was I have to tell you, it was one of the best fan clubs in the country, maybe in the world. The woman who ran it was friends with the Harrison family, so she knew
Nice.
George's sister and his parents. They had done many charitable things in George's name. They had a Bangladesh fund. They were sponsoring a child, I think, in Thailand. They had a cancer fund set up for his sister. It was a lot of really good stuff that they were doing. Well, somehow George got a hold of one of their newsletters. It was sent to him, or accidentally. I don't know what happened there, but he didn't like what he read. There was something in it that displeased him, and so he right away went and talked to Alan Klein, who was their manager at the time, and said, "Hey, I thought there are no more Beatles. There shouldn't be any more Beatle fan clubs." And that, as they say, was the end of that. So, I mean, Paul had left the fan club, and I said, "There's no more Beatles," but he didn't stop the clubs from existing. It was George who put the axe to the fan clubs. After that, they were ordered to disband all the fan clubs across the country. I think many of the fan clubs then reverted back to being independent clubs the way they were in the beginning, right? Because we were no longer under the auspices of Apple Records.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was a pretty traumatic time, and I think a big loss, a tremendous loss when you think of all the music that we could have had had they stayed together. Because yeah, they all went off and did their own individual things, but it was never the same. It was never at the level of the four of those energies of the four of them working together. Was never replicated. So it was a big loss for all of us, for the whole world.
Absolutely. I agree with you. I think that, like you say, all of them together gelled nicely, for putting the music together and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And then when they all went apart, I mean, John's stuff was okay. I think the last song I remember that I really enjoyed was George Harrison. That last that last rock song he put out.
Uh-huh.
I forget the name is, brain fart, but so yeah. Oh, I got my heart set on you, right? That was great. That was classic.
Yeah.
And yeah, I really enjoyed that one. But yeah, I remember kind of tapering off too. I didn't hear it as much. Of course, my sister got married and moved out, but I didn't hear that much of the Beatles music on the radio at that point. So for me, it kind of petered out.
Yeah, I mean, many of us tried to stick with them as individual artists, but I mean, I enjoyed John's Imagine album, and I think I bought Paul's first solo album, All Things Must Pass, George's album. I didn't buy a single album that Ringo put out. So yeah, it was different. We didn't have that, we didn't have that sense of loyalty anymore because they didn't exist anymore as a group. And so we all sort of went our separate ways and lived our lives. For me, I finished college and, got married, had a family, lived a very ordinary, mundane kind of life in suburbia. And then, like I said, that Shirley MacLaine came out in 1987 with Out on the Limb, and that gave my life direction once again. And I've poured all my energy into that since.
It was incredible when that came out. I remember when that came out too. That was an incredible experience. In fact, I just watched that movie the other day.
Oh, you did?
I watched some stuff the other day. I was watching that. Yep. It's inspirational to me as well.
Yeah. Well, she was a pioneer. She had the courage to
Hmm.
come out and to, say what she believed in.
Hmm.
And I think that there were thousands of us that were sleeping metaphysicians,
Hmm.
and she woke us up, and we started our careers because of her.
Absolutely.
I owe it to her, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, in writing this book, were you, were you able to interview any of the family members of the Beatles at all?
No, I
Nobody
didn't.
involved? Okay.
I chose not to now.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw that. I was just wondering.
I had never met the Beatles, uh, and I thought, I'm not going to start now, 60 years later.
Yeah, yeah.
you know. So no, I just used material that had already been published.
Right.
It was more of a research project,
Mhm.
um, of how that music influenced us.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
that's what I thought, because I figured maybe behind the scenes you would talk to somebody, but But the book is, there's nothing wrong with the book. The book is great. If you guys want to read it, get that book. Inner Light. It's a
You
great
know,
book.
yeah,
It's a great book.
thank you.
I loved it. Every second of it. I like those kind of biography things, these kind of books anyway. I've got Elvis stuff packed here. I got stuff on different groups and all that stuff. So I'm a big music buff.
Yeah, I like biographies as well.
Now your parents. Let's kind of talk about that, because you kind of talked about your dad. Once you got older, saying, hey, you're a little too old for this stuff. How were they feeling about that music while you were growing up?
I don't know how they felt about the music, but I know that they allowed me the freedom to have that fan club, because I kind of took over our basement. We were living in Chicago at the time, in this little bungalow, and we had a base all knotty pine wood on the walls.
Mm-hmm.
And I just went down there and started plastering all my posters of the Beatles all over the place. And they were supportive. My dad was supportive in that, he'd take me like to go look at mimeograph machines. And then the biggest thrill I got was when we went to visit a friend of his, a photographer friend of his, Jimmy Ogata, who had a place called Triangle Camera on the north side of Chicago. My dad and he were friends during the war, and they served together. And Jimmy wanted my dad to go in on this photography business, and he wasn't able to afford to do it. But when my dad did build a dark room in our house, and whenever we needed to he needed supplies, we would go there. And so when we went there once, and Dad told Jimmy, oh, Joanne's a Beatle fan. And Jimmy goes, wait a minute. And he went in the back and he came out and gave me 3 original black and white pictures of the Beatles that he had taken at the press conference in Chicago. He was one of the photographers that had gone to the press conference. I still have those to this day. They're in the book, by the way.
Right.
And that's my greatest treasure. Yeah, I also had a gift from the Beatles fan club. It was a little cardboard cube of an apple, and it had their signatures on it. And we were told that the Beatles actually signed that, and that was our Christmas gift. When I say our, I mean the fan club presidents,
Right.
the area secretaries. And for the longest time, I really believed that was their original autographs.
Mm-hmm.
Until my husband said, let's go to the Antiques Roadshow and have them authenticate this. And I said, no, I don't want to do that, because in the off chance that it isn't real, I don't want to know that. I want to die thinking I've got their autographs, right?
Absolutely.
Well, it turns out it wasn't real. It wasn't the authentic. They lied to us and said, they told us those were their autographs and they weren't. So there's this typical of what was kind of going on with that fan club.
Right.
I write about that in the book as well. But no,
absolutely.
The pictures from Jimmy were my greatest gift. Yeah.
Well, I can understand that. I mean, I don't have autographs from big stars. I got some baseball autographs that were sent to me, like from the Oakland Coliseum. So who knows if they signed them. I have one autograph from a big star, and this is going to probably make you laugh. When I was growing up, my father was not a rock and roll fan, obviously, because he was born in 1926.
Mm-hmm.
But he was a big fan of the cowboy Gene Autry.
Oh, yeah.
and I used to have to watch all those movies, So he had me write a letter to Gene Autry, and I ended up getting an autograph photo back. Now, whether it was him that signed it or not, who knows? But at least I could feel like, hey, I got an autograph from this guy, so I know what you're talking about. When
Yeah.
you say that.
Yeah.
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 If you were to present the Beatles to this younger generation, how would you do it?
Well, because they don't have anything remotely like the Beatles, this would be totally brand new to them.
Mm-hmm.
So I would start with getting them into the music, the just the sheer joy of the music. You know, dancing to that music, that early stuff in the early 60s, and then gradually, you know, the same way we did. Start to listen, see the evolution of the music, and then listen to the lyrics and see how that speaks to you. How does that speak to your soul? Because I think every generation is looking for the same thing. They're looking for validation. They're looking for a reason to be here. So yeah, there's a lot there for them. And you know what? Some of the Facebook Beatle pages
Mm-hmm.
are filled with younger people. And
Right.
they sound exactly the way we did in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
It just I was reading some of the messages and I thought, boy, that was taking me back 60 years, because that same almost naive kind of in love with, we were in love with the Beatles, right? We daydreamed about them, about being with them. That kind of crazy enthusiasm. I mean, I went to a couple of Beatle concerts when they were in Chicago, and I just remember the energy and the excitement, and I was like crying. That was such an emotional connection, and that still exists, which absolutely astonishes me, because the Paul and Ringo could be their grandfathers, so they can't relate that same way that we did, which I think a sex therapist would have a field day with, right? Try to see about what we were going through. But anyway, yeah, I think that starting them out with that early music and then building it up the same way that happened for us, I think would be absolutely beneficial for them.
Do you think, speaking of beneficial, do you think that the music, as far as the Beatles themselves go, was beneficial to the group, or do you think that was the lead up to these guys deciding to go their separate ways? You think?
Well, I don't understand. What do you mean?
Well, I mean, because eventually they broke up and went their separate ways. So do you think that the music was opening their minds up enough to where they said, "Hey, you know what? I think I want to do my own thing. Let's just go our separate ways."
I think that there was. I mean, I've read a lot about how George was frustrated that he was having a hard time getting his music heard, and that Paul and John were dominating the albums. They were writing the majority of the music, and it sounded like George almost had a fight to get a piece in there. So George had this huge backload of music that he wanted to share with us, and so that's how we got All Things Must Pass. But I don't know. I don't know that was an issue for Ringo. I know Paul just wanted to work. I mean, I think he just loved the whole idea of working with the others, and he was like all set to continue to do that. But then, John got involved with Yoko, and the dynamic of the group changed, and John wanted to kind of do his own thing, and then Paul decided, well, I'm not going to sit around and wait for the four of us to get together. I've got this music I want to do as well. And so it just naturally ended up where they went in their own direction.
One more question for you.
Okay.
This is flown by. This was fun. This was fun talking about this book. I love it.
Thank you.
You're on the strip in Las Vegas. It's kind of like similar to bringing the music to the new generation. And there's other people with books about the Beatles there as well. How do you get people to read your book?
Well, I think my book is from a whole totally different perspective because it's coming from the perspective of a former Beatles fan club president. And there aren't that many of us out there, right? There's a few books that are out there about the fan club experience. And also, the whole idea of I mean, there have been some books written about the Beatles' spirituality, but really not how it's affected how it affected the fans. It's just about their own journeys, right? So that's what makes it, I think, a little bit different. My perspective of it, being a fan club president for those 8 years, when we were in the middle of it, growing up in the 60s, a lot of these other books that are being written are by people that did not have that experience of the 60s. And then how their metaphysical journey was parallel to ours, and how it influenced us. So that's what makes it different, I think.
Absolutely, absolutely. So what's next for you?
I'm not sure. I started writing a book called Why Are There So Many Cleopatras? Because in my work as a past life therapist, I do run across people who believe they were somebody famous in a past life.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so I thought, you know what? There's a lot of questions about reincarnation that people ask. So this was more an anthology about, that's just one of the chapters. It was like I was going to take different aspects of reincarnation, like what's the difference between a soulmate and a twin flame, and other questions that people always ask,
Right.
and do that. But then I was thinking about doing a book that's specifically about soulmates, because that's another area that's very misunderstood. People assume soulmates are always a romantic partner, and that's not necessarily the case. So I wanted to take some of the case studies I've done of people that have come in with relationship issues to see, the partner that you have now is your partner 300 years ago, and this is what happened then, and look how it's repeating now. So I was thinking of maybe doing a book like that too, but I don't know. We'll see. I have to see where spirit leads me.
Absolutely. How can people find you?
They can please come to my website. It's joannedimaggio.com. And you can read about the different types of regression sessions I do. In the soul writing session, you could sign up for one. I do them all on Zoom. And so you can sign up if you'd like there. Also, there's information on my other books, because this was my 6th book. And I have other books on reincarnation and soul writing that you might be interested in.
We'll have to get you back on to talk about reincarnation.
Okay, I'd love to do that.
That's one of my favorite topics.
Okay.
Past lives and all that. Absolutely. I had mine done last year. I wasn't famous. I was a farmer.
Well, there you go. Most people aren't famous, so there you go. Yeah.
It's kind of a bummer. I thought I was some rock star, but you never know. So so I'll have to get you back.
Okay, I'd love to.
I appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much. The book, Inner Light, and I think it's a fantastic book.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
My thumbs up. All right, you have a great rest of your day.
You too.
Okay, bye-bye. Bye. Okay, guys, I'll share her contact information with you and a picture of the book so you can see what it looks like. Tomorrow, we are back at our 6:30 time slot. Farrah Rose Perry is going to be with us, and she's going to, she's been on before talking about some of her work, doing exorcisms and stuff, and so she's going to be talking about some more of that and some of her newer cases, of the work she does for cleansing and exorcisms. So that'll be a really good show. So again, that will be back on at 6:30 p.m. Pacific for that show with Farrah Rose Perry. Thank you everybody for coming, and for you guys in the evening that are going to be watching this, enjoy. Okay, because you can still access this all day. Also, I do have that ticker running at the bottom, and that's because we are getting back out, and I forgot to do it at the beginning of the show. We are getting back out and ghost hunting after a couple of year hiatus, and I've just been going through equipment, and I noticed that some of this equipment needs to have repairs done and stuff, and so I've kind of calculated up to $100, and if you can find it in your heart to donate and help us do that, that would be great, because we really want to get out and start helping people. And everything we make goes back either into the radio show or it goes out, into equipment and gas and everything else to do these investigations. So that would be wonderful if you could help us out. You don't have to, but it's just one of those things. All right, I'm going to leave you guys now, and I'll leave you with her contact information, and we're going to call it a day, and I'll see you guys tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Pacific. So here we go. Let's see if I did this right. Oh, finally, I was looking for that earlier during the show. Not that one, we want the other one now. Okay, website, JoanneDiMaggio.com. And the book is The Inner Light. And you can get that at Amazon or from her website because she has several other books out as well. All right, gang, I will see you guys tomorrow. If you like the show, share it with 5 people. If you hated the show, share it with 5 of your enemies. We are Equal Opportunity here at California Haunts Radio. And we're just trying to get the word out about our little old show. And I'm glad the internet held up. We dropped off a couple of times, so you never know. I've got to go get a new box because they told me when they upgraded my internet that my box was not working right, so I have to upgrade the box. Plus, when all the power went out and we had all those big storms, that's when things started acting up even more. All right, guys, I'll see you tomorrow, 6:30 p.m. Pacific. Have a great day.